Thank you, Chairperson, His Excellency, Mr. Serrano. Thank you very much for inviting me here. To the hosts, thank you for asking me to present this lecture today. I'm really grateful for the invitation, and I want to raise 3 concerns at this conference, which maybe later you could discuss further. The first one is the issue of diversity and social cohesion in the world. The second is the growing trend towards rampant materialism. And the third is the rapidly expanding gap between the super rich and the poor. I think that these are 3 concerns that are really at the bottom of the conflicts that we see in the world. In my view, one of the biggest challenges that we face is that of how to build social cohesion. Our people are fragmented into so many divisions that are competing for the scarce resources of the world, that these divisions are no longer seen as colorful and enhancing, but rather as competing and debilitating, leading to strife, violence, and wars. We saw in the Second World War, in the war in Rwanda not so long ago, in recent conflicts around the world, how nationalism, religious differences, ethnic differences, and so on, are stirred up to induce ordinary, compassionate human beings to become perpetrators of the worst forms of violence. These wars dehumanize human beings and leave scars on their souls, which continue to plague them and plague society generally. Within this context, how do we mobilize communities constructively towards nonviolent action for just cause? The second concern, and that is the challenge which we face, is the fact that people are becoming more and more materialistic. And we see a drastic decline of the compassion and love. And we see instead an increase in self-centeredness and aggression. The result of this is that there is a trend worldwide of people mobilizing communities opportunistically to promote some personal agendas, and as a result, the strife of the masses continue, despite possible change of power, change of focus, and so on. A result is that the oppression of the poor continues, and their struggles do not materialize in any benefits for them. What then needs to be done to ensure that struggles are constructive and not destructive, and that at the end, the situation improves rather than deteriorates for the poorest of the poor? The third challenge is the huge gap, which is increasing all the time between the super rich and the very poor. In such situations, the vulnerable community is the poorest of the poor, who often get thrown in on the front lines of wars and confrontations. They gain nothing, but are the ones who suffer the most. Their poverty and vulnerability makes them pawns in the hands of the rich and powerful. How can we turn this around? How can education, media, and the justice system help to change the situation? Gandhiji wrote in Young India in 1927, and I quote, "Those who seek to destroy men rather than their manners adopt the latter and become worse than those they destroy under the mistaken belief that the manners will die with the men. They do not know the root of the evil." Tariq Ali wrote in Inside the Revolution, and I quote, Friedrich van Hayek and another distinguished Austrian economist, Ludwig van Mises, have shown that the tendency to lose political freedoms when market economies are replaced by planned economies is a threat inherent in the logic of the situation. Although there may be ways to avert and solve the problem, it cannot be averted or solved simply by weeding out psychotic personalities like Stalin and Hitler, or simply by putting people like Tariq Ali, who believes in freedom, in charge of the process. This is what he wrote. And then Martin Luther King wrote in a recent book, Where Do We Go From Here? And I quote, "For Europe, for ourselves, and for humanity, comrades, we must turn over a new leaf. We must work out new concepts and try to set afoot a new man." Fanon in The Wretched of the Earth, Fanon, and those who quote his words are seeking, and he quotes, "to work out new concepts and set afoot a new man," a close quote, "with a willingness to imitate old concepts of violence." Is there not a basic contradiction here? Violence has been the inseparable twin of materialism, the hallmark of its grandeur and misery. This is the one thing about modern civilization that I do not care to imitate. This is what Martin Luther King wrote. And so these three different quotations have a synergy between them. And these articulations clearly warn that replacing one person with another is not the solution to the problem we face. There is a need for a much greater revolution in the minds of people. This can only be achieved through quality education from the early childhood level and through lifelong learning of new values that underpin a cooperative, inclusive, and cohesive society. It is at the earliest learning years that values of compassion and giving, rather than greed, accumulation, and materialism, can be learned. Little children also learn instinctively to accept others without being judgmental. They do not tag people with symbols of race, color, creed, religion, beliefs, and political affiliations. These are learned from adults. They learn about democracy by accepting what others decide without imposing their own will. They learn from adults to be aggressive and impose their tantrums on others. Learning takes place in the home, what parents and adults teach, what the children observe in the home and in their environment, and then what they learn at school, both from their educators as well as from other children. But today, a powerful source of learning is the media. We are inundated with media which depicts violence, glorifies the macho image, the glamour of wealth, and the artificial beauty of makeup and lifestyles, creating gender stereotypes. At the end of the day, Life is about wealth and about power. There is no emphasis on simplicity, conservation, giving, or loving. I'm sorry, I know that there are lots of people from the media here, but I'm sure they agree with me that this is what our media is doing today. And Gandhiji wrote about his experience with his first case in South Africa, and I'm now talking about the justice system, and I quote, this is what he said. I had learned the true practice of law. I had learned to find out the better side of human nature and to enter men's hearts. I realized that the true function of a lawyer was to unite parties riven asunder. The lesson was so indelibly burnt into me that a large part of my time during the 20 years of my practice as a lawyer was occupied in bringing about private compromises of hundreds of cases. And this happened in South Africa. This is humane justice. It creates opportunities for people to change, for people to be able to get on with their lives, more enlightened and better able to handle the challenges of life through these positive experiences. But there is another side to justice, and that is two-pronged. One is from the victim's desire for the perpetrator to be punished, to feel the pain, and to endure the pain that they as victims endure. The second is the notion that if the punishment is not harsh, then others would not be deterred from committing similar offenses. And the idea that this would result in escalation of violence and criminal activities. How then does one balance these conflicting perspectives? Can we create a space for restorative justice, especially where the emphasis is not only on the restoration and compensation of the victim, but also a humanizing process that helps to transform yesterday's criminal into today's good, ethical, and moral human being? If we look at our Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there are some truths to the statement that comes out of that. This is certainly not idealistic. There are many examples of how people have been able to change given an opportunity and an enabling environment. How victims, too, have been able to change and see the humanity in the perpetrator, and to be able to forgive and reconcile. For this to happen, we need to harness the support of the entire community and the media, and particularly our religions. What we see today is indeed morbid. People are not just tried by the courts, but also by the media. People's characters are so assassinated, so demolished by negative publicity, that one of two things is bound to happen. One, they cannot live with themselves any longer and are forced to either become more hardened criminals or commit suicide. And the second, they become so hardened against the negativity that they begin to justify the wrongdoing as being normal. And all around them, other people also see wrongdoing as normal. So the process continues, and we have a society that accepts wrongdoing as normal behavior. In such a situation, there is no boundary between what is right and what is wrong. And there is no longer either self-control or social control on behavior. Gandhiji said, and I quote, "Performance of duty and observance of morality are convertible terms. I close quote. For him, duty had to be based in moral and ethical terms. There can be no compromise on this, and that is the true nature of a just society.